That is accepted and then.
What is that?
Huh?
Second world.
Yeah, our movement.
Yeah. Hello there.
Hello.
I'm Jane Eckert. This is my gallery, and I'm glad you're all here. And today is sponsored by the Washington Arts Council, and Michelle Gora is here to kind of tell us a little bit about that. Great organization here in town. So, Michelle?
Well, thank you all for coming. We appreciate that. And thank you to Jane for hosting. It's fantastic. So the Arts Council is a commission of the town made up of volunteers that represent different areas of the arts, performing, visual. And the goal of the Arts Council is to just help promote the arts in our town and to recognize what we have. We're working on a cultural district application with the state so that they will recognize the culture and arts that we already have going on here in our town. And one of the initiatives of the Arts Council is this oral history project. The Gun Memorial Museum has been recording people's stories to record the history of our area, and the Arts Council wanted to make sure that we captured the artists that make this area so special. So this is our first official oral history for the Arts Council, so I thank you all, and I thank both of you for volunteering, because this is a wonderful, wonderful way to get started. So I'll be here after if you have any questions about the Arts Council and what we do, but I'm going to turn it over to Jane and Eric. So thank you.
Thank you. Hi. So I'm so excited to have a gallery here in Washington Depot. It's the best space I've had in years. Just so you know a little bit about me, I started out in 19th, early 20th century American art. And then in the mid-90s, I moved to Captiva Island in Florida, and I met Bob Rauschenberg, and my life took a turn more into contemporary art. And at that gallery, we worked with some of the great artists of that period. Christo had a show on Christo, and John Chamberlain, and James Rosenquist, and so it was all very exciting. And but then in 2008, I would always have a summer home up here. I came back up to this area to make this my permanent residency. But in 1999, a very fateful year, my friend Don Gummer, who had a home still has a home up in Salisbury, Connecticut, invited us to lunch one day, and he was giving his wife a painting, and was my husband then, not my husband now, but Henry and I looked at it, and it was by Eric, and it was this wonderful little painting that was very traditional still life with silver and crystal and china in it, and on a beautiful white tablecloth. And then in the middle of the table was a empty white hot dog tray, which didn't fit in at all, and it just made us laugh, and we felt like there was something very special about this artist, and he harkened back some to the 19th, early 20th century artists that we loved, but was doing something very different on it. And just segue, I have to say that one of the great moments of our life was in 2008, before Robert Rauschenberg died. He actually collected Eric's work, and he bought had two of Eric's paintings in his collection, one of a shirt painting and another painting, and then they went to the Rauschenberg Foundation when Rauschenberg passed. So we felt like Rauschenberg had very good taste too. So it's been a pleasure, and so that was in 1999, and Don Gummer said to me, Jane, Eric was selling through a little gallery, kind of a frame shop gallery in Sharon, Connecticut, and he would do all these beautiful little paintings, and it would sell out all the time. And like Kevin Bacon and all these stars, everybody from that area, came and bought all of his work. But Don said he said go meet him, and they'd both gone to museum school in Boston. He said go meet Eric, and you need to sign this guy up. And so so that was great praise, and he was exactly right. So first show on him was in 2000.
Right.
24 years later, so 24th show that we've had on him, and it's been a pleasure to work with him, and it's lasted longer than most marriages do, but here we are. And it's been a great ride. And selling him first in Florida, and now I'm back on his tour. But what I love about Eric too, I mean, Eric is a realist. He does paint from life, and whether he's doing a still life or whether he's outside. And when he would talk about this area, especially Lake Warramog and the surrounding area, I could always see him light up. And he had so many stories to tell from growing up on the lake. And so that brings us here today, to him to tell us some of his stories. And so Eric, your family goes way back on the lake. Tell us about
Right.
the history there.
Well, they go way back, but as you know how this area has changed so much in the last 30 or 40 years, but we kind of started, we were kind of the original interlopers. That my great-grandfather bought a property that became the Lakeview Inn, that became the Inn on Lake Warramog, and then everything kind of went from there, which is one of those things where you're either happy or sad about that.
And what year was that?
I think it was the early 1890s, I think. My grandma was born in 1894, and I know they were up there then. I don't know all the exact dates, and believe me, I'm gonna have to refer to this phone often for my own stories, which is sad, but that's just the way it is. But yeah, so they had a presence up here for a long time, and actually most of the North Shore Road was owned by some Bonning or Millar, or we have two of them in the audience here, and Edmund. So they remember a lot of this old Lake Warramog tales, and you know, it was really an amazing place.
And your house was a very early house, right?
Right, on Bliss Road, right on the corner. If anybody's been here for a while, it was a beautiful old colonial from 1753. And it's been since raised, and a much bigger, more extensive house has been built in its place. But it was an amazing little spot there because it was, you know, kind of grand house. I didn't really realize when we were growing up how, you know, what a cool place it was. You take things for granted when you're a kid. But, yeah, so there was cousins and uncles and aunts, and all the way down, almost to the state park. And, you know, sadly, I don't think anybody holds any of that land anymore. It's only worth about $1 billion.
Yeah, so, okay, so you've always told me these great stories, these memories you have on the lake. Tell us a few of them.
Well,
You have to get your cheat sheet out.
there's so many things. I mean, we were just little boys, but I can remember things like, we used to take my father's boat to get pizza across the lake. You know, he had a jet boat, and we would go over there and get pizza from a place called Richie's, which later became Docks, and maybe some of you people remember that place. But it was that kind of a quiet, you know, unassuming place that sort of thing seemed perfectly natural. And now maybe, you know, I don't know if you could really do such a thing anymore. The winters on the lake were so incredible in the 60s and 70s before whatever's happening to our environment, but thick ice and ice boat racing and people, the cars out on the lake, and you know, skating on Lake Warramog once when there was black ice, and I don't know if anybody knows, but there had been no snow. So this, you know, this incredible lake surface, absolutely smooth as, and you could see the fish, you could see stones underneath, you know, and it was very, let's see, what else do we have here?
Well, and ice fishing,
Ice fishing, diving for plates, like the water was so clear when I was a young kid, you know, my father would throw these tin plates in 20 feet of water, we could see them, we would dive down to get them. And only a few years later, the lake had a huge eutrophication, and it turned, you know, kind of pea green, and now it's been repaired all the way back to, I think it's one of the cleanest lakes in the state. But that, that area of the lake off of Bliss Road, Hopkins Inn, all that stuff, there was just so many, you know, family groups and parties, and I remember when I was in nursery school, we had a big party for all the nursery school kids, and this woman came to take pictures, you know, she was one of the mothers from the nursery school. It was Inga Morath, who was, well, quite a famous photographer, and she offered my mother the whole portfolio of photos she'd taken from the nursery school picnic, and my mom said, "Oh, you pick one out." She just didn't bother, and therein goes, that's, you know.
And she was Arthur Miller's wife.
Arthur Miller's wife, and it was just a recurring theme with the Millar Bonning Forstmann group, where we would say, yeah, whatever. So, let's see, my father had a boat on the lake called the Voodoo. It was a Chris Craft, it was super fast, and actually he swamped it twice. But he also saved this guy who was out of gas in the middle of the lake and brought him back, and his last name was Marks. And a couple of months later, a truck showed up at our house and dumped off an entire truckload of toys for my, I had 3 brothers, and we're all like, you know, only within 5 years. So, and there was a guy from Mark's Toys who had saved in the middle of that. So that was sort of a, you know, a lucky break there, and played with those toys for a long time. I remember getting, one of the things was a doll, because the guy said, you know, and you're all boys, but somebody has to understand, you know, it wouldn't exist in the world. So I remember that being a little bit of a thing between my brother and I. Who played with the doll? Let's see, Bill Hopkins, who was just a giant, you know, 6'4" farmer, dairy farmer of the old stripe, you know, had been here for probably, the family's been here for 300 years odd. And we used to spend a tremendous amount of time on his beach, and my father and I, and he had a Hobie cat. I don't know if you guys remember what a Hobie cat was. They were like catamarans, but it was brand new at the time, so like we were new on the lake with the Hobie cat, and biking around the lake when I was like 6 or 7 years old. I don't know, parents don't let their kids do that anymore because of milk cartons and all the hyper, you know, safetyism that's going on with parenting, which is, I think, really problematic, because I remember feeling so independent, you know, being allowed to do that. My mother trusted us enough to not get into trouble and to go into New Preston and go to Brussel's, you know, store and buy gum and candy, and of course sneak a look at the Playboy magazines which were there, you know, and he put it, "What do you think you're doing?" Yeah, Dean, my brother Dean, was my partner in crime for most things, and we used to stage bike accidents on the side of the road because of people coming, you know, the weekend would get incredibly busy. There'd be so much traffic going to the state park and going around the lake, so we thought that if we were able to stage a really convincing accident, there was no question someone was going to stop and offer us money for our hospitalization or our, you know, mental care post-accident. But it never really happened. So later we decided we would start a tomato stand, which was, you know, moderately successful, and, you know, that went to lemonade and, you know, just all the kind of crazy things you think of as a kid, you know, think are going to be absolute winners, and they just aren't.
Were there a lot of people that, or many people that lived on the lake full time back then, or was it? I mean, your family, you did. That were there others, or was it mostly seasonal?
I think that at the time it was largely a seasonal population. Houses got shut up for the entire year, and things got very quiet in the winter months. But yeah, it was. I mean, maybe it's more the same now than it was maybe 10 years after I moved away, because it became a more year-round community, and now I think it's back to being a little more seasonal. I mean, the houses are certainly quite a bit different than they were. You know, the Mulva Hills house on the North Shore, a few things still remain from when I was a kid, but it is really tarted up considerably.
There were how many inns on that lake?
There were 8 friendly inns on Lake Rormark. I challenge anybody in the room. Anybody can do them all? Well, since I wrote them down. There was the Sachem, the Hopkins, Pinnacle Valley, the Boulders, the La Grada Inn, the Lamarwick, the Birches and the inn on Lake Warmont. And then the casino, which was still there when I was of drinking age, and that was quite a legendary watering hole. We used to hit
And that's
before.
a private home now.
Yeah.
That
I think
burned down.
they're all private homes, except
No, the casino burned down.
well, I know, but the
Hawkins is still
Yeah.
there.
stonework is still there, isn't that right?
Yeah,
Because they've got the,
Birches are down.
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah.
I know I'm gonna get into some
No,
corrections.
no, if there was a paddle boat, it used to be.
Yeah, no, that was at the end, right, the showboat.
I used to take my, oh, yes, that's called the
Mid-70s.
Oh,
And I
okay.
used to take my kids for.
What's that, Rick?
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
that's a,
yeah, it was and that
was
later
so
also
sweet.
for,
What, it's a paddle boat?
yeah,
itself?
the showboat, somebody set it on fire and pushed that on the lake. It was quite a spectacle, as I remember.
Tell your July 4th stories, because those were.
Yeah, so also, it's nice to see so many people from so many different eras in the area, but I'm not sure if they do it anymore, but I remember as a kid, pretty much every landowner on the lake got a case of road flares. And so the entire 8-mile thing would be surrounded by these flares, and they'd all go off at like 10 of 9 just before the fireworks did. And so for about 15 or 20 minutes, the entire lake had this incredible pink cloud. And as a kid, it was just so magical. And looking back on it, it just seems impossible that everybody got together, and it was such a given that was gonna happen.
Still do it.
And they do, that's good. But yeah, so I worked at the Hopkins Inn for many years, and during the time, and of course, they're still doing the flares now, I just heard, but Eric Sloan, if you remember, the artist from the area, very famous, and he would do the fireworks every year, and it was pretty good for a long time. But then he got a little long in the tooth, and one year he'd been drinking a little bit, and he set off a satellite. And if you know what satellites are, like these little spinning things, they're not terribly dangerous, like if you use them correctly, when you throw them toward an audience, and one of them takes off, strikes like a beehive hairdo in the crowd, it becomes a much more, a bigger liability. So he asked Eric if I could take over, and funnily enough, I was named after Eric Sloan, but, so I took over the fireworks the next year. And my first go around, Franz had gotten these mortars, like big professional style fireworks. And one of the mortar barrels was too short, and I said, Franz, we can't shoot it out of here. It's like shooting a gun with no barrel. It's just gonna. He's like, no, don't you worry about it. You just put it in there and you'll light it off. So I did, and as predicted, the thing went about 4 feet up and shot straight down to the bottom of the lake, set the field on fire. I ran down there, like melted my sneakers. And the funny thing was, the Warren Fire Department was sitting at the top of the hill with a case of beer. And, they were like, nothing's gonna happen here. And so I'm running down there, melting my sneakers, putting out hot spots. And they finally show up at the last minute, and they're like, is it all right, you got it? And they got back up to the top of the hill and finished their case of beer, and we went on. But the Hopkins, being I had a rich dad who was not terribly good at making you understood what work was, because he did a lot of reading and hanging out, and he was pretty good at smoking cigarettes and mixing scotch. But I worked for Franz Schober up there, and he really taught me like what it was to have a day-to-day thing, it's called work. A lot of people do it, they receive paychecks for it. And I had no idea really what that was all about, but working for him made me realize that like everything you do is a daily struggle. It doesn't really ever end, and the value is in actually the doing, not the having, not the, the money, whatever. It was really in what you accomplished as a worker and what you're proud of. And I was taught that by him, which I really think was one of the most important things that ever happened to me, because I don't like scotch. I really don't like to drink that much. So my dad's lessons were not that well taken. But while at Hopkins Inn, and also I'm sure some of you remember, Hopkins Inn was reviewed by Patricia Brooks in the Times, and it it was like the place to go. So I was like, would do valet parking, I was a bus boy.
And you're like a teenager at this time,
Yeah, like 17, 18, 19 with a real booming times there, and meeting Dustin Hoffman and Paul Newman, Mick Jagger, Mike Nichols, it just went on and on, really, some of the
Who's
most.
the one that they?
Richard Widmark, Philip Roth, Claire Bloom, James Cagney, Milos Forman, I mean, it was just incredible, I don't remember half of them, but it was an amazing place to see, you know, all of these people congregate, you know, in one place where you could get a decent hotel butter, you know, it's the only place that really knew what garlic butter was. But,
So you told me a story one time about somebody that got turned away because they didn't recognize.
yeah, that was, Mick Jagger came in one day for lunch, and our maitre d', who shall remain nameless, was a big Journey fan. And if you know Journey, Mick Jagger, they're sort of like on either end of the spectrum. So Mick goes in, sits down at an empty table at the window, and you know, I'm like, and he goes up to the guy, to Mick, and says, "I'm sorry, sir, that table hasn't been set yet. You'll have to wait till we seat you." And so he slammed his thing down, got up, bolted out of the room, peeled out in his Jaguar or Porsche, whatever he had, and yeah, that was the end of Mick for us. And I guess he had the Stones had been playing in the area, warming up for a concert tour or whatever. But we never let the nameless maitre d' get over that one, because you know, how often do you see that guy? It was incredible. Let's see, where else are we here?
You want me to tee you up on something else?
You're
Yeah.
supposed to, Jane. Where are the watermelons? I was like, she's just gonna toss me marshmallows. Otherwise, you're gonna let me ramble for hours.
Well, no, it's good, it's good. So, what I've always, I've taken a lot of photographs and video of you when you're out painting. And I can tell that of all the places that you paint outdoors, when you're around Lake Ormond, it seems like there's something very special to you, something magical. I'm sure it's, you know, because of your childhood and all that. And actually around here, we've got,
That's
some.
South Kent. That's not.
Okay, that's South Kent.
This is 341 and 45 intersection, sort of the gateway from the north to the lake area. That I call that the Tannerville, where all the Tanner farms are. This is this here is the Angeline farm, and then we have back there a view from Curtis Road next to the Brooks farm, which I guess is all for sale now. It's kind of sad because there's no way it's going to stay 275 acres. But they all happen to be on my bus route, which was, you know, I would fall asleep and wake up and see, you know, this view or whatever. And one fine day, we were coming down Rabbit Hill Road, and this was in the foreground, and some kid threw up in the back of the bus. But Mrs. Turl, who was our bus driver, and she was like, you know, a classic, you know, foul-mouthed kind of cigarette-smoking bus driver. And but she was sweet as hell, and she said, "You're gonna want to pick your feet up." And I was like, "Why?" She's like, "Because it's coming." Coming down Rabbit Hill Road. And so here comes the contents of this kid's intestines. You know? So I picked my feet up, and she's like, "That sweater, put it on your face. I don't want you puking." That was not so typical, but not completely untypical, you know, bus trip or time in Warren. You know, Warren was and New Preston and all these towns were so much different. In some ways, they were like a little Appalachia related. You know, I mean, it wasn't quite the swells were here, but in much smaller numbers. And the interesting people tended to be like Jerry, the parachute guy who'd blown his leg out jumping out of a plane in World War II. And he sort of lived in New Preston, and we always saw him as he would walk, and his leg would do this crazy thing. But he would, like, you know, he maintained a great presence in town for a long time. And Charlie Gross was an artist of, We later found out that his wife did most of the art that he was selling. He had several wives and a whole bunch of children. And, you know, I don't wanna, you know, I can't down talk any of these families, but there were characters, and it was really interesting to see that, you know, one of the things you miss the most about a town are what you would call regulars, you know, the people who really are the fabric. You know, and the people that come in and out and enjoy the town for its beauty and everything like that, they don't quite have that panache that the people who endure winters, which is really, that was part of the biggest problem up here, was like, you know, getting through winter with $1 in your pocket, because everything was basically shut down. But, yeah, so New Preston was, where else are we going, Jane? Come on. What guidance? See, she's like, we don't have to rehearse this, it's easy, you'll just talk.
Well, but I think you can tell just by hearing Eric talk and going through his memories, this observation that he, I mean, so clear, all of these things that happened in his past, and that keen eye that he's always had in life, and there's many, many more stories you could hear.
Yeah,
But that keen eye is what makes him such an amazing artist, because he does see the world in a very unique and precise way. And if you could have known his mother, she was like, Carol was just amazing. And she taught you boys, I think you didn't wander too far from home, but she taught you to observe everything around you, right?
She had, you know, we didn't know what it was at the time, but she had some serious social anxiety issues, and it was probably, my dad was becoming a heavy drinker, and that probably had a lot to do with it. But in that, she never really let us know there was any kind of a problem, but she would deal with the anxiety by like taking long walks in cornfields and finding arrowheads, of which she found thousands and thousands of them. And, you know, we would walk along with her, and she would explain to us, you know, that quite often the most incredible thing you're gonna see in a day just might be right there. It's not, you know, in Timbuktu, it's not in the next state, it might be just right in front of you, but it's not if you don't look.
And skies, she talked to you about
Skies
weather and
and
skies and
yeah, I mean,
climate.
she and Eric Sloan were pretty good friends at one point, but I think as a result of that, not such a long relationship, but she was very influenced by his knowledge of weather and you know, and to this day, you know, I know when it's gonna rain. I know that, you know, when you're painting landscape, you better know, because you don't want to set up and have everything there, and then all of a sudden it's raining. But yeah, she was really crux. So my grandmother Louise was she was an excellent artist, and she went to the New York Academy, I believe, in like 1915. You know, and was a really incredible drafts person, and they had her designing wallpaper, I think, at the time, which was kind of what women were allowed to do. Sadly, they didn't get to be artists; they had to do some sort of industrial skill. And then my Aunt Jean was from what I've heard, it may not be true, but I think it is, was the first woman jewelry designer for Cartier in New York. So there's a strong vein of creative people before me, and all of them let me know that, because I drew all the time, and once they saw that, they felt like that was something to perpetuate, which they did. And it was, you know, that group of people that really kind of allowed me to get going on what I do now, and thankfully I'm still doing.
And I think it's interesting because this area has this great history of creative people still today, and all through it, with writers and you know, artists and Sondheim, and you know, on and on and on. And I think it's fascinating that your family had this creative streak, and that they came
We're
here.
totally undiscovered.
Until you.
Yeah. You know, I mean, Warren, you know, like I said, Warren was filled with these notables, and I remember my brother first started cleaning Phil Roth's pool, and I picked up the slack after he went to college. And Philip Roth was a prince. I mean, there's many things that have been written about him, whatever, misogynist, you can say what you want. I knew him as a guy who hired me every year to move his furniture, I mowed his lawn. We had conversations that were, I just wish I'd recorded them because he was such
And
a
again,
really.
you're what, 14, 15?
No, I'm like 16 at this
16,
time.
okay.
And so one fine day, it was before Dean stopped, and he was kind of outshadowing him, and we were doing the backwashing of the pool, but there were people out of the pool, and we had to go ask Phil a question. And we come out, there's Claire Bloom, lovely, Phil, hi. Linda Lovelace? That was a shocker. And she didn't have a top on, so it was really something for a 16-year-old, something I revisit often. Yeah, it was.
And I'm sure he loved every minute.
Oh,
of it.
he was
Yeah.
laughing, he was laughing, and as he caught up with us, we were going out of the car, he's like, what do you think about that? But he was a really cool guy, and, I don't know, it's, I don't know where I was going with that, Jane.
Well, that's enough, that was
Okay.
a
Don't do it further.
So obviously, a lot of you have histories and live on the lake or anything, so if you have any other questions, then feel free.
I have a question, because it's so wonderful to have painted the same landscape at different points in your life and being able to look from your 16-year-old self to your obviously only 45-year-old self, and your 45-year-old self looking back at your 16. How does that reflect in your paintings?
Well, I think you have to, I really think I remember and try to appreciate where I am at any time, and, you see what we moved away from on the lake and what it's become, and, those changes are, you can't stop a beautiful place from developing, it just is doing that and will continue to, but I think you remember to freeze the moment if you can, and that seeing and looking and staying in a place to paint something, not just taking the obligatory photograph and then bringing it home. Because you can do that, and you get more accurate paintings probably, and people can go like, oh my God, it looks just like a photograph. But that's not what I want. I want people to say, wow, that looks like a mindograph, or what I call an emotograph, because it's, coming from my own translation, if you will, so.
And also, I feel like when you're out there and you're feeling the light and the humidity and,
Right.
whatever's happening, I feel like you really have a talent to bring that into
Right.
the painting.
And, the smells and the difficulties, and, it's not difficult, come on, I'm a painter. I do pictures from an easel, it's not exactly like slave labor, but the joy of realizing that you've really gotten you've run the most out of a place, you've really, really looked and been there, and you've entertained the passerby who come and ask you a million different questions, which I really thought I was gonna dislike as a painter, but it turned out to be really the best thing of all, is to have that sort of interaction, because, they give you opinions here and there, but mostly they're very, supportive and kind of, so happy that you're doing it, because this is kind of 15th century skill that you're exhibiting out there where all the Teslas are going by and everything. But, yeah, it is that observational skill that my grandmother, my mom, all of them gave me, that I still think is the best.
How long do you work on doing, say, a painting of this size?
Oh, it's like 15, 20 minutes.
I
No, this
think
one
it was
was,
that long.
this was probably 2 weeks. This one was the one I did from the back of the van. That's the plein air one. This one I worked out in the studio. You can see there's a pretty strong relationship, so it's sort of just an explosion.
So how long would you have spent then?
2 weeks probably on that thing.
But sometimes you do the whole thing outside.
Yeah,
too.
like this is done entirely plein air, that piece was, but that took maybe 2 or 3, coming back maybe 7 or 8 times over the course of 2 weeks. And, you have to watch the weather, so it's not always the same, so when you start the painting out, you want to, say, well, it's gonna be a foul weather day, or a gray sky day, or, it's gonna be blue sky, and so you sort of get a version of the sky in first to kind of inform the landscape. And the one thing you know about clouds is they do not hang around to be named. So you can do what you want with that. That's the least important thing. As long as it speaks to what you saw that day, that's probably enough. But everything below the horizon, that's where you've got to spend some time to, the trees and
But speaking of
Beautiful
clouds.
picture here, the sunspots are so evanescent, there's no way you could possibly be
Right.
there and do it.
Right.
And that you mentioned that that's something in studio, but no doubt you had sketches or whatnot that you bought in the studio, that you also take photographs to go to the studio with.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've got an iPhone. I use it, especially for, the cloud, especially good cloud formation that's moving at 25 miles an hour across my field of vision.
Yeah.
I use that to augment, but no, I do not grid the things and copy. This was done entirely from a pasture in South Kent, that the farmer with that barn let me up into this ancient pasture, which was so incredibly cool, because when you got up there and you saw 70 years worth of cow pies, because they really don't go many places, they hang around for a long time. But you realize that this is like an ancient place, it wasn't a new thing, that this is a farm that was those fields have been used for something similar for 300 years or so. And I think to get that, all of a sudden, that's when your hair stands on and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this is my job. Because, that's the lovely thing about it, those little moments when you realize it's like, well, nobody else is here. I saw this.
So the clouds are very prominent in all of your paintings, and you were friends with Eric Sloan.
Hell yes.
So he had some kind of an influence on you for that,
Absolutely.
because, it's like almost, in that particular painting, it's more than half.
Right. And I think,
Back to that one as well. Back to that one.
I think that the clouds in the sky are very important, number one, for setting up what the weather is and what the light's gonna be like, but, let's face it, where would we be without the sky? It's what sustains us. So I've always felt like giving the sky a little extra attention kind of speaks to our need to remember how important the sky is, and, it's our ceiling, it's our lungs, it's.
And I don't know how you do it, but you just have this ability that I always feel like they're just kind of floating off, coming toward
Yeah.
us, they're moving all the time, and that's you don't have to give your secrets, but.
No, it's just observation, and hopefully you get it right, and then when you get back to the studio, you can fine tune things so they make sense, because you're not gonna be perfect plein air.
Can you talk a little bit about your trompe l'oeil work? And how that came about?
Well, I was newly married in Hoboken, New Jersey, and jobless, as many of us Forstmans tended to be, but I didn't have the money to back up the joblessness, and I had a son who was just born, and I took this little trompe l'oeil table into a place called Mabel's on Madison Avenue. It was a shop that was run by a woman named Peaches Gilbert, and her cat's name was Mabel. The cat was always there, and she was a little shop right across from Pier de, I think, and then on 72nd.
And explain what you did on the table, so you're kind of.
Have you into that, Jane?
Oh, okay.
So I would paint, the very first one I did was a postcard with my view from Hoboken of the city, which was like the Empire State Building and a pencil going across it. And I brought it in there to Peaches to see it. She loved it, and she said, well, why don't you leave? Then I had another one with, it was a tilt top table. And I left them and drove back to Hoboken. I got back to Hoboken and my phone was ringing. And she said, we sold both of them. How many more can you get me? I said, well, I didn't have any table, I didn't have any plan whatsoever, but that's where the trompe l'oeil started. And I did maybe 280 of those tables over the years, and had quite a few luminary types had tables, but.
Well, the funny thing was, I had seen one because I found out later that Ralph Lauren had bought one, and he had it up in his home store there, in that beautiful building he has on Madison Avenue. And I remember walking in, and it had looked like keys were on the tabletop, and I think a tube of
Right.
lipstick or
Right.
something like that. And my husband and I were like, oh my God, this is so wonderful. And it wasn't until many years later that I realized that it was one of Mary's
And I have to
tables.
correct myself, because in the building, 2 buildings down in the Clem Real Estate Building, Paul Leonard, I don't know if any of you remember.
Yes.
He was a tremendous designer, kind of one of the early kind kind of started country design with whitewashed wood and incised floors and stuff like that. And I worked with him for a summer, and that's where that Ralph Lauren table ending up in New York, because he had been his designer for a while. Paul had been for Ralph, or Ralph Lipschitz was, you know, his time.
When you were in at the museum school in Boston, did anyone teach you to paint trompe l'oeil, or is that something you just kind of developed on your
No,
own?
we had a trompe l'oeil class with a really old crusty teacher named Henry Schwartz, who became one of my favorites. Because at the museum school, it was was not like an academic style school. People, they gave no grades. We only had like a withering review at the end of every semester, which ended up being considerably more important and kind of instructive than getting grades. Grades you can crumble up and throw over your shoulder and not tell your parents about. But you get the bad review, and if you didn't perform, if you didn't put out and do your best work, the students were so ready to jump on you, and the teachers too, because they wanted you to know that, you know, you're here for a reason. Art school is not a joke, and it really wasn't. But I think a lot of kids went into that, or parents sent them to art school thinking, you know, he can draw a little, whatever, give him something to do. And the museum school didn't allow that to be, you know, they really lambasted you if you didn't work. And so that Henry Schwartz taught trompe l'oeil, and that was my first look at, you know, when he said, no, I want you to do everything exactly as it is. And I was like, what? No gesture? No suggestion, you know, no color field, the kind of things that they were also taught at the time, you know, and so that's when really I was like, okay, people still do this, it's okay. Because that's kind of what I'd always wanted to learn. I wanted to get to that nth degree, and then I was like, oh, then I'll become that abstract painter. Well, obviously, I still have not become good enough to switch directions and become an abstract painter, and I don't think I ever will. But yeah, that's where the trompe started. And it's still, you know, one of those things I call it like, it's like 6 foot away trompe l'oeil. It's not really as good as these guys in the 19th century that were absolutely amazing, but mine is more of a casual, you know, less exact.
I wish to commend you and the gallerists on the lighting of this trompe l'oeil, because it's a double trompe l'oeil.
Yeah.
The shallow thing of the unhappy daffodils is one part, but the crummy drawing of the daffodils, the light is coming from a different direction. So the light's coming from this direction of the
You are a good
daffodils.
observer.
But this light here is the perfect light for the shadow on the left side of the piece of paper.
Yeah,
So I think
no,
that
we think about that
I
a
think
lot.
that's very, very cleverly lit, and I wish to
And what's the
commend you on
title on that?
Revision.
Yeah.
Looks like those daffodils have been waiting too long.
Yeah, well, I had another, it was like, here today, gone tomorrow. That was the original title. Until I scraped off that last one, and I put it on the side, but I never threw it away. Most of them, if they fail, become palettes, because I don't like to use paper palettes, because you put them into the waste stream. So I have hundreds of failed paintings that are covered with mixed paint. It's just kind of what their fate will be if they don't make it. You know, so they live on underneath many, many layers of mixed paint.
Well, we're gonna stick around for a while, so have some food, drink.
Are there any more questions?
Oh, we have no questions,
See?
okay.
I have one. I'm interested in your shirts in particular.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
And like, you know, I see J. Crew, Tommy Hilfiger, what prompted you to choose those brands?
Well, originally I didn't put the brand names in at all, but then I thought, well, you know, I got to give credit to the makers. So, like the Hilfiger shirt is one of the newer ones that I put the names in. But my brothers and my eldest brother was born in 1960. My youngest was born in '65. There was 4 of us. And when my mother had to put us into shirts to go out to dinner, to go to a friend's house, or go to relatives for Christmas or whatever, it was like a half an hour, 45-minute battle, like, you know, like a Civil War outbreak. And, you know, just getting them on. Mommy, she'd always button the thing up here. It was just like, it was such a crazy thing. So, and then also the Forstmann-Jane Company, they were involved in, you know, fashion of all sorts. So, and then there's another side of the family that were all incredible business people. So all of those are mixed into the original 4 shirt painting I did in 1994. And Kevin Bacon, not to drop names, but I will incessantly, bought the first one, and Kira Sedgwick said, boy, you could do that subject again and again. I was like, really? So I started, and I have done it for.
And the first one kind of represented the 4 boys.
Right. And that struggle, but all those other things wrapped into it. And then later on, you realize that everybody's had an experience with a button-down shirt, men or women. I mean, I don't want to be all male about it, but that's what those are my shirts, so that's why I paint them like that. But everybody's put on their dad's shirt, or they've, painted the house in an old shirt, or they, get dressed up for church and put on a shirt, or they look at the incredible amount of ironing they have ahead of them. Whatever the reason is, it's a universal subject that I think continues to kind of continues to be interesting for me, because I really can't paint things that aren't fun to do. I can't fake it. It will become a palette eventually. So, yeah, the shirts just keep going. I think I've done about 100 paintings, and we have George Stephanopoulos. I'm not going to go, but
Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton.
Sold a lot of them.
Yeah.
And in Europe, we've sold them all over the world, actually.
Yeah. So it was a good move to keep painting them, because that sort of keeps the studio going. And those are a few things I can guarantee you're going to sell every year, and that will kind of fuel supplies and the needs that I have to keep the studio going.
I was gonna ask, since obviously you know this area so well, you've lived here, seen everything, how do you keep your paintings fresh, and how do you find your subject matters? Are you walking around, what are you doing to?
Well, I do a lot of driving in the area, and like I said before, I just look all the time, and the nicest time to be driving is when you're not actually behind the wheel, and I find myself with my head totally turned to the window like a dog, because you're seeing all these things that you only see fleetingly when you're driving. And so that's really it. When things stick in my mind, I try to make a notation or remind myself later to come back to it and see if it does the same thing again. And if it does, the scene. And I painted, I've painted things over and over and over. There's nothing.
Well, I don't see fall or snow.
Yeah, well, I've got plenty of those back in the garage. You want winter paintings? I got them. I love painting in the wintertime. I love painting in cold weather. But as far as commercially successful, not quite as much as summertime. We have sold some, but I do have a few back at the house. And fall is too beautiful. Absolutely too beautiful. That should exist in your memory only. I've seen so many terrible liquid text inflected, large, heavy color, too much yellow, too much orange, in a thing that really can't replicate it properly. It's to me, it's just a couple of weeks of magic where you ought to just sit down and look and just, take some real time. Don't just drive to the, see the leaves falling and drive through it. You really have to stop and smell and hear that as the wind sound changes through the trees as the leaves get drier, and the smell of leaves drying, and the incredible things that happen in the fall. And to me, it's really the most magical thing about this region is that the actual changes. Winter's getting kind of weak these days, but I love that change. I love the fact that you don't have to wait too long before everything's going to be different just in a few weeks. So to me, it's like a rebirth. Every 3 months, you kind of get this new vantage point. So,
Eric, have you explored the human form or portraiture in your career?
I can do it. I
You can?
promise you, I can. I just, other than the 50 or so people in this room, who I all love you very, very much. But I feel like humans, if I put a person in that landscape, even a small one, the question would be, what's that person doing? And that's
Or
not
your
what
mind
I
goes
talk
right
about.
to the person.
Yeah, and we love ourselves so much. That I feel like I don't have to perpetuate that, because I knew Herb Abrams growing up, another Warren luminary, and he is one of the only, John Singer Sargent and Herb Abrams are the only two people who have two presidents in the portrait gallery in DC. DC, the National Portrait Gallery, and I saw he was incredible. I mean, he was really one of the best portrait painters of the, serious portrait like you think about, but he had such a facility for character, such an incredible ability for space and the person in it, and the importance of that person, that I realized that you do that, or it's not something I could do part-time. I think you have to devote your entire life to that. And, quite frankly, I don't like people that much. And I love being alone.
Do you follow your mood, or is your mood created when you see a scene that you want to paint? Or do you say, I'm in a really whimsical mood and I'm gonna put myself in that?
Right.
I mean, your sense of humor that comes out, not on the plain air,
Right.
but do you say, I just feel really whimsical today, so I'm gonna sit in my studio?
Well, I think the whimsy just happens, I think you kind of come across it, ideas occur to you. But there are definitely days when you're feeling, a little skip in your step or whatever, and then there are those darker days when you paint other things. But,
There have been times when you started something and you said, what do you think about this? And I went, oh, he's not in a good mood today. I don't think it's nice, but we're not gonna be able to sell that probably.
yeah, I have a few, but they are all palettes.
What makes you choose the different sizes? This is elongated, that's square. I mean, is it something about the scene or just?
Yeah, it's pretty much informed by what I'm looking at. And I've done a lot of very long panoramics in the 90s and early 2000s. Because you kind of can't stop. If you're in a beautiful place, it's like, so is that tree more beautiful than that one? And is that, so you sort of tend to go from, corner to corner and get informed by the need to have all of these features in there, because you really can't decide what's the best. Because the holistic thing, everything you're looking at actually, especially out in the Hudson Valley and Eastern Dutchess County, which I don't paint so much there anymore, but they're such beautiful places that it's hard to decide a single subject, so I tend to be.
And a lot of
broader.
times you're looking for a certain time of day,
Right.
like you tend to like later in the afternoon.
Yeah,
It
like
seems
raking light.
So not so full sun and.
Yeah, so I don't know, there's no clear answer to that, but it's, I don't know, I love it. I wish that, that's all I had to do.
And it's an
all day.
ongoing thing, because I'm like, you could get a standard size frame so much cheaper than you can. And he'll make it like 24 and 1/8, But that's okay, I mean, what he wants to get in there, he wants to get in there. So
Right.
that's
So,
kind of
anyway, that's that description, I hope. Anybody else?
Do any of your children paint?
My daughter, Alyssa, is spectacular, and she does people almost exclusively. So she's like the other side of the coin. But she's out in Los Angeles. She decided to work in the film industry instead of being a painter. Probably wise at one point, but with the strikes and everything, I'm like, why don't you come back and be a painter?
Yeah.
But all of them, my eldest son was a very good photographer. My number 2 son, my number 3 child, Justin, owns the restaurant Casita up in Massamoka in Massachusetts, so that's obviously very creative. And he could really draw and paint, but just completely turned his, that was what Dad does, so he didn't even do it. And my youngest, Olivia, is working as an interior designer in New York. She's 24 and just really starting to hit her stride, and she knows what she loves.
She knows who she works for.
She's working for
John Michael Murphy.
and she's just, it couldn't be a better arrangement, because he's a tremendous person and has
Is
become.
John Murphy here?
Yeah,
Oh, he's a doll.
isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, he's just, you meet him, you're like, God, I want to be friends with you. Just immediately.
Yeah.
But
You know him.
he's a great mentor. So he's given her, she's 6'1" and a little, so she comes into the world for many years as a teenager, but she was bigger than all of her friends, and she sort of like tried to be smaller. And this guy has enabled her to stand up and to be who she is, and watching it, indescribable. So,
Okay, well, we're gonna stick around, I'll go back to that. And so feel free to ask Eric anything.
So sorry, we showed up late and I feel terrible about it. And I know I missed a lot, but could I just ask one?
yeah.
Sure.
Do you pre-stretch your canvases before you, or do you take a canvas, pin it on a board and then mark?
Well, okay, the easiest answer to that is 97% of my paintings are done on masonite panel.
Okay,
So, now the nice thing about masonite is that you can cut it any size you want, which annoys the bejesus out of Jane. But, it also allows you to edit, you know, and if there's something, you know, that table saw, and just get rid of the offending part. Problem solved. When you have to choose a canvas size, and you know, it is wise, I think, to tack them up and work like that, because it does give you some flexibility. But a lot of times I feel like kind of hemmed in by the sizes that, you know, the art store gives you every 2 inches, you know, and you kind of come up with a shape. And then you gotta stretch it, and then you have to deal with the grain of the canvas, which I'm not terribly happy with. So, when I was in art school, I discovered masonite, which at the time was $12 for a 4x8 sheet, so I could get 20 paintings out of a sheet. It would cost, you know, pennies per, you know, that's, I'm always after a good bargain. So, but in the end, it turned out that masonite is one of the more stable surfaces you can paint on. It's archivally stable, and you know, it doesn't swell or mold up, or you know, it's a good durable surface. So that's what I do. Yeah. Cut out dozens of pieces of odd-shaped masonite and decide what to do on those things, rather than being very calculating and think, this one has to be. You know, I'm just not that organized in my head. So, anybody else? It's really great to have somebody, I could sit here till, I don't know. Yes.
This is something that I make Sallis
Meg,
share.
I knew I saw it.
It's been years,
Good to
but
see you.
something that maybe most of you don't know, but Eric volunteered a lot of time at the Sharon Historical Society. And that was a real gift. It's a gift, it was his creation for the Society of the Iron Industry,
Right.
which was integral to that area.
And Meg, that was your initiative, as I
Well, I
remember.
was volunteering
Right.
and, you know, whatever there, but, so he would come in and out when he had time.
Right.
And this was probably, let's say maybe 2000, 2022, it took you a long time, because you did a whole series of them. But I just would like everyone to know that there's a real deepness and a real gift that Eric brings to the community over and above his part. So that's all I'll say.
Thank
I'll say something else too. His generosity in giving to organizations, local, through the years. And what I see most artists do is, like, somebody says, well, would you give something for this auction? And they'll go find something that they couldn't sell, and they'll dig it out and, you know, here, you can sell this. Eric always paints something specific for that event. And that just shows the time and the generosity that he has to do that, which, you know, we could probably sell in the gallery and make money on, but it's just that he is the most generous person, I think.
Yeah, and I try to give the entire painting, because they usually offer a percentage, which I feel like the organization is asking you for something, what they really, really, really want is money. And so to give them a good painting that they take 100% of the price for, it's gratifying for me, because I feel like I've done my bit. I don't have to serve on a board or any of that kind of thing. You can just sort of give them a really good painting. They're happy. They talk about you later, and it always comes back. It always comes back, because giving is one of those things that, as everybody who's done it knows, it's not just in here that helps you, but it does the people who get it remember, and they talk about you for years to come. Everybody wants it.
Susan, did you have I'm sorry.
Oh.
Did you have a question, Susan?
I was gonna ask, if you see a beautiful scene, and then you
with Sharon in that area, you know, farmland is disappearing quickly. And, you know, it's always like, that's a opportunity lost personally, but the larger universal loss of, you know, what you knew was beautiful and just now isn't. And there's a house over in Smithfield, and there's the view from Smithfield looking to the east. It may be one of the most beautiful valleys, small valleys in the United States, just absolutely, you know, all these pastures. And then this guy came up and he built this house that was just so out of keeping, and it took everybody's enjoyment of the view away because he built it in front of everything, you know, and just kind of like, you know, sighting. You know, I don't mind the house, I know you own the land, but put it somewhere where everybody else can enjoy it a little bit and then still enjoy what they always have enjoyed, you know, I think it's important. Not possible.
Eric, I wanted to ask you what your view of the local art scene is, and particularly with younger artists in the area.
Well, I gotta tell you, I'm not too well informed. I am kind of like a monk or like a hermit when it comes to painting. I don't associate with a lot of artists, not because I don't like them, but it just, I don't have time in a way to like get a community going. Because I have kids and a family, and that's what that's the direction I chose.
What about Five Star? What about
Now,
Warrington?
thank you for that. Talk about teeing it up. So I'm the president of the board of directors for 5 Points Arts in Torrington, which is a phenomenal organization. Run by Judy McElhone, who is just an incredible organizer and director and a tremendous artist in her own right. She gave all that up to work and to bring this thing to fruition, which we just bought the Yukon campus, I think 4 years ago now. It took 2 years to close the deal. But now, if everybody in this room should go see it because it is absolutely incredible what a rather drab university building with, you know, blue Yukon rugs and, you know, blue trim, what it's turned into now, just a highly functional, really accessible to anybody art center, with printmaking and painting and drawing and photography and ceramics and getting computers and 3D printers and things like that. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And so that's where I see the most young people. They're coming out of here for Hartford, Yale. You know, people are starting to really matriculate into that situation, and I think that's super important to have that, because when I came into the area, or back into the area after going to school in Boston, there was a really thriving small gallery scene everywhere. They had them, you know, this town had 3 galleries. There was a gallery in Goshen, Connecticut, believe it or not. Several in Litchfield, you know, so every village had somebody representing artists, and they're just not here anymore. And so it's very hard for young artists to grow up and develop thinking that they're gonna make a living from it. They generally grow up thinking they need to know how to write a good grant, you know, or how to ask for some type of help, or to teach, you know, or to find, but there's no illustrating jobs anymore. There's, you know, the computer is taking so much, and I don't wanna sound like Fred Flintstone, but a little bit like him. But it is disconcerting to see how hard it is to pass the torch, because, you know, a lot of times the hands are not there to take it. We'll see what happens with art over the long run. I think it'll survive, it always has, but it needs help, especially on the lower end, you know, and starting out. And I'm sort of still, you know, in the middling end, but I'm very happy with what's happened in my career, and I think I'm one of the luckiest people in the world to be able to continue to do it without any breaks. And you know, we've had never a bounce check for this woman. Never. And, you know, I know all the people who I've sold paintings to. She makes sure I know them, and there's never been any, you know, attempt to backdoor, and just a very good working relationship that I was fortunate to find and happen right at the right time, you know, in the late 90s, early 2000s. But that world is different.
When I took your work to Florida, I wasn't sure. I mean, I loved it. I mean, we didn't take the landscape so much there, but we took the shirts and the trompe l'oeil and the still lifes. And he sent a box of paintings down the very first time, and we're like, well, we like them, you know, we'll see. We we opened up the box and the gal who was the director of the gallery called me like a couple days later. She said, "We've sold them all. Now I want to paint